And let's also establish within these social networks credibility, so believability, so we can trust what people say and what people do. So while this still has the concept of being just simply a social network, we can certainly see that it has the possibilities of providing a very valuable learning experience. And so an interesting thing I think about these social networks too is that people, not just websites, become entities on the internet, and so consequently can be addressed, become sources of information that we can take advantage of in these networks. So it's not just about people using the data on these networks, it's about people developing, acquiring capabilities within this community. In other words, people learning how to use the goals that are present in that community. Now, if you don't believe me, here's an interesting study that was done at the University of Minnesota. So basically, what this study suggested is that people who are using social networks, once again, like we said, what is the goal of education? Is that they're actually practicing the 21st century skills that we want students to be able to use. They're developing a positive attitude about technology. They're editing, they're customizing, because they have a vested interest in doing it within the group in which they're operating. And so consequently, these social networks can have a great deal of potential in creating educational environments. And what they found in this study is that 94% of students use the internet. That's no surprise. 82% use the internet when they're at home. That might not be a surprise either. But 77% belong to some social network. So they're already developing these skills that we can take advantage of. They're already developing the skills of technology use, creativity, interaction for new ideas and new thoughts, and communication skills. What mashups do is attempt to take information that's on the web, that's on the internet, and combine it with other information to create a more knowledgeable, meaningful experience. So for example, this is a mashup. If you can't tell from this particular map, that's on Google Map of the Open University of Hong Kong. Now that means I could look at a website that showed me a map of OUHK. I could then go to another website that showed me the weather in Hong Kong this week. I could go to another website that showed me events that were happening in Hong Kong this week. I could go to another website that would show me pictures of Hong Kong. But then it's up to me to go to each one of those sites and in my head pull all those pieces of information into something that's meaningful. The idea of a mashup is, why not let the computer do that work? So what this particular site does is it draws information from a lot of some different sites into a singular purposed whole. To me, that's building of knowledge. Because otherwise, a map of Hong Kong is just a piece of data. But a map of Hong Kong used in conjunction with something else creates knowledge. We talked yesterday about how to easily build these mashups. Like for example, through RSS feeds. So basically how you're able to capture information from these sites and consolidate them with respect to other information to build mashups. It's a fairly interesting and not so difficult process. OpenKapow is an example of a tool that allows someone to simply specify a series of sites from which you want to extract content. It's a free open source tool, but it basically means that what you can do is you can mine the websites for content that can be incorporated into other applications. So mashups, I think that has great potential for the development of educational content. Well, what about search? It's my feeling that Google is not a learning tool. It's not a learning space. It doesn't make us smarter or wiser. It doesn't provide us with knowledge. I'm reminded, Eric Schmidt, who's the CEO of Google, he was in an interview once, he was asked about, what's wrong with Google? And he said that every time anyone uses Google, they see the bugs in Google. They see the problems with Google. And why is that? That is because if I go to Google and I say, what is the capital city of China? It gives me 10,000 answers, and I know there's only one answer to that question. Why can't it understand? Why can't it understand the context in which I do it? Why does it just give me data? And that's part back to this idea that information develops into knowledge when we can make comparisons, do assessments. Google's not doing that for us. It's just giving us data. Now, that's good for the people, the SEOs, the search engine optimizers. It's good for the people who, if you're running a business, you go to them and you say, I want my business to show up on the first page of Google. And you pay them some money, and they'll promise you that your website might show up in the first 10 elements of a Google search. So it's helping them. But I don't think that many of us are in that situation. So what search needs, like I said in the case of knowledge, what search needs is context, semantics. It needs association, such as you see, for example, in mashups. And it needs multiple perspectives of how to look at data. So as a result, I think there's some very interesting things. I'm here to tell you, consider using a search engine other than Google. That's a big step. But there's a number of other search engines that I think sort of point the way in which that searching can become a more meaningful way of the knowledge process, a more meaningful learning space. So, for example, here is a search engine called Mahalo. And of course, I look up the site where I'm working, in that case, Slack. And of course, you can see that what it gives me is it gives me a lot of other different information in context that have to do with that query. Here's another one called Freebase. Now, what's happening in the case is that Freebase, what it attempts to do for searching is it tries to take knowledge or information or data from a number of search engines and put meaning to them. So, for example, we have here, let's say that you wanted to go to a search engine and say, what are the names of female CEOs of public companies in order of market cap? Now, does anybody have any idea about how you would formulate that kind of query to Google? First off, is you couldn't. But here's what Freebase does. And in reality, what it does is taking this data and looking at this data and trying to establish the context of this data. It's able then to give you that kind of meaningful answer. And that's not just data. That's knowledge. Here's one called PowerSet. What PowerSet does is let's recognize the use of Wikipedia. So we're not just searching the whole web. We're searching references in Wikipedia. Let's try to unlock the meanings that you see in data that is constantly changing and constantly under review and constantly being updated in Wikipedia.